I hope everyone out there across the world is having a great day. And I'd like to welcome you to my webinar on the Asterisk Sangoma Trunking Module. Before we get started, I'll introduce myself a bit. My name is Joshua Culp. I'm a Director of Engineering at Sangoma, as well as the Asterisk Project Lead, which is basically a fancy way of saying I figure out what the Sangoma Asterisk team is working on, and I look out towards the future, look at industry trends and all that to continuing to develop Asterisk to be the best it can and the most relevant. So with that, so the agenda for today, I'm going to go over a bit of an overview of the closed commercial modules in Asterisk. I'll talk about this new Sangoma Trunking Module, what the installation process is like, options, what it's actually like to use in practice, as well talk about SMS a bit, which I'm sure is a topic that probably has some frustration with people, as well as some documentation and support aspects, and there will also be a Q&A at the end. For the Q&A, feel free to put in your questions at any time. As always, whenever I do talks or anything like this, even if the question is not directly related to the topic, feel free to throw it in and I will answer it if I can. And then from a sales perspective, if there's salesy questions, which I am very much not a salesperson, Mike White is also on the line for any salesy type stuff. So let's start off first talking about closed commercial modules in Asterisk. These are closed source, meaning only Sangoma has the source code. We distribute them as binary downloadable modules. And the ones you probably are most familiar with would be Codec G729A, as well as DPMA. DPMA is the binary module that's used to enhance the functionality of Asterisk when combined with our D and P series phones. So for example, DPMA provides visual voicemail and provisioning over SIP. These binary modules are only available for the 64-bit x86 platforms. We are not currently building or making them available for ARM. I do acknowledge that ARM is a growing CPU, both as in devices that we use every day, but as well from a server perspective. So if ARM support is something for any of these modules, not just Sangoma Trunking, if it's something you would be interested in, please add that as a question so I can keep track of that essentially. Right now, a new one joins this list, which is the Sangoma Trunking Module. So you might be asking yourself, I looked at this webinar, what is this module really about? So this is a closed source module for Asterisk that makes it easy to connect to our SIPStation and VI trunking services for both calling and texting. It's easy to install, and I'll talk about that here soon. And it uses the same key code or token functionality as you've seen in FreePBX and SwitchVox. Minimal user configuration is involved for this, and it's available for Asterisk 20, 21, 22, and 23. Just a heads up for people on this webinar, Asterisk 21, as of yesterday, is actually security fix only. So if you've deployed Asterisk 21 anywhere, you now have a year of security fixes, after which it will go end of life. So now would be a great time to look at moving over to a currently supported version of Asterisk, with Asterisk 22 being long-term supported and Asterisk 23 being a standard release. So my personal opinion would be move over to at least Asterisk 22. So the installation process. All of our commercial binary modules can actually be installed using this mechanism. We provide, when you're building Asterisk, menu select, which is a sort of GUI-based ability to select modules to build or disable, as well as configuration options that influence the build process in some manner. However, this is a little known thing. Menu select can also be used from the command line as part of a build process. And this is documented on docs.asterisk.org. So you can programmatically enable additional modules such as this trunking module if you wish. So the trunking module is located under resource modules at the bottom as res_pjsip_config_Sangoma. As the module name might imply, this does not support CHAN SIP. So if you're using Asterisk 20, this will not work with CHAN SIP. You must use CHAN PJSIP. And for anyone who's never seen menu select or used it, this is what it looks like basically. So on the left-hand side, you have essentially categories. So channel drivers, PBX modules, resource modules. For this, you would select resource modules, and then down at the very bottom is external, and that's where binary modules are located. So there's Res Digium Phone there, which is DPMA, and then the Sangoma Trunking Module, or Res PJSIP config Sangoma. One of the things to note over how this actually works is that we don't include these binary modules in Asterisk itself. Instead, what happens when you select that is we will go out to downloads.digium.com and get a manifest file which tells us the latest version of the module and where to download it. And then when you do make install, we will actually go through that process. So it downloads a tarball, it extracts it to the appropriate place, and essentially that's all you need to do from an installation perspective. I am aware that some people, at least for DPMA, have gone ahead and manually downloaded the tarball and installed it themselves. That's still also an option with the trunking module, but in case anyone was unaware, this is also an automated step. So there is further documentation on sangomakb.atlassian.net/wiki. I'd like to give a props to Chris, who I don't believe is on this call, or webinar rather, but I'd like to give him props for that. Chris May, who is the open source solutions architect, I believe his title is. I can't quite remember, even though I think I was the one that made it, but he's helping out Mike White and myself from an open source perspective. And if you've attended AstriCon in the past or read blog posts and stuff, you've probably seen his name. So the configuration file, the name section defines the endpoint/trunk name. As we go through this, or as I go through this, it's kind of like using a PJSIP wizard. It's actually underneath built on the same code and implementation. So you define an endpoint trunk and name, you define a type, which is Sangoma. Provider option sets either VI or SIPStation, depending upon which of our trunking services you're actually using. Key code option specifies the key code, and then just like wizards, you can specify all the other options that are relevant. Most relevant being endpoint/context, so that your incoming calls go to the correct dial plan context. So this is what it looks like in the configuration file. So in this case, I've chosen Sangoma 1. Underneath this will create an endpoint named Sangoma 1. So if I'm dialing something, I would use pjsip/phone number at Sangoma 1. I've specified an inbound context of trunk_inbound here, and so incoming calls would go there. Now, what actually happens underneath is when Asterisk loads the module, it contacts the appropriate provider, be it VI or SIPStation, and retrieves configuration information using the key code provided. So that's username, password, codecs, and host names. As a result, these are things you don't need to configure. And in particular for VI, their infrastructure has some added complexity to it, which can make configuration difficult and complicated. So this takes care of that. So underneath, just like PJSIP wizards, it goes ahead and creates the needed configuration types behind the scenes. So that's endpoint, AOR, contact, all of that. And then, like I mentioned previously, for outgoing calls, you can then reference the endpoint you've configured, just like normal for dialing. So PJSIP/phone phone number at Sangoma 1. And then for incoming calls, they go into the configured context or default if one is not configured. From a security perspective, I always suggest not using the default context. Always explicitly configure a context for your inbound calls and ensure that that context doesn't have access to sensitive stuff like outbound dialing. So here's what it looks like from a P2SIP show endpoints perspective. We've got Sangoma 1, we've got the authentication, and this is particularly for SIPStation instead. And we have an identify section so that incoming calls get directed to that Sangoma 1 endpoint. And then these are the outbound registrations, both to the primary SIPStation server as well as the backup. So from an SMS perspective, this does use the built-in Asterisk message functionality. So incoming text messages come in via SIP message. The documentation on the knowledge base does provide helpful information on extracting the phone number. In particular for SIPStation, it uses a specific header that provides the DID information instead of the to or request URI in a lot of cases. So you need to explicitly go and look at that header. Outgoing text messages, on the other hand, go out over a private HTTPS API for both SIPStation and VI. You might be looking at this and wondering why there's a difference. In the case of incoming, by using SIP, we're able to reuse the session that you've already established outbound to the infrastructure. So it means that you don't have to open up any other ports or configure a webhook or do anything like that. It just flows over that existing SIP session. Now, an area that Asterisk does not support is MMS. And this is due to the fact that Asterisk itself has no concept or implementation for MMS. So we just support text messaging. And as always, the 10 DLC requirements still exist for this. So you'll need to work with the trunking teams and go through that campaign process before you're actually able to use this functionality. As well, a reminder, AstriCon is happening next year, so AstriCon 2026, as part of Scale in Pasadena, California, on March 5th and 6th. This is different than the past few years where we've been doing IT Expo. We wanted to change it up, go back to our open source roots, which Scale is all about. So we're trying this out. There's tons of other events and talks at Scale that are extremely applicable to the AstriCon community, the Asterisk community, the free PBX community, as well as open source and telephony in general. So for anyone who wasn't aware of this, it would be a great thing to go to. Our call for speakers is open until December 1st. We will accept submissions after as best effort. As well, this is our lowest price in a long time. So we're just charging an extra $50 for an AstriCon fee on top of the Scale cost. Scale is currently $80. So in total, that would be $130. And that also includes 2 t-shirts, one from Scale and then one for AstriCon. I would strongly suggest everyone take a gander at that at Scale as well as AstriCon. And if you're interested in talking about something, feel free. Even if you don't think it would be interesting to others, you never know. So please submit a talk for that. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming to this nice, short and quick webinar. If anyone does think of any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm also available on the Asterisk forums at community.asterisk.org, and you can find me in other places too. Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.